and just briefly on the power of an image, making them realize how susceptible they are to imagery in their daily lives, even, you know, as a child. And you know, they're being told how important language is and how they have to express themselves through their writing in English class and whatnot, but really, you know, the power of imagery, you know, particularly right now with, you know, what's happening on the coast is, you know, perhaps the most powerful tool we have to talk about certain things that can't really be succinctly expressed in words. So I think that's a huge, huge point. Does anybody else have anything?
Yes. So I'm curious, this conversation is making me think about, my work is primarily with parents of kids in schools, talking about how to improve the overall quality of education. So this question of making sure there's arts education is always a conversation, right? Like parents talk about it all the time. And then I think what I feel like we've talked about is the integration of arts in every kind of discipline and every kind of way. So I'm curious what y'all think about, is there a tension between having art for art's sake and having art as a supporting piece of teaching math or whatever else? And is there a tension, and where do you kind of come down on that? Or if there's no tension, like, I mean, I feel like we're talking mostly about being in an art class that is to produce art, as opposed to, or I'm wondering if you guys can comment on when art is part of like a section on some social reality or something like that, and whether and how that does it change a student's experience or doesn't. You know,
it can if it's done right.
Yeah.
That's the key, if it's done right. When I worked in Arts Connection, that's exactly what we did. We went into the teacher's classroom and said, what unit are you working on? What do you need support in? And we would design art projects for whatever that lesson is. The danger is when the art becomes secondary to the 3 R's, because that's the message is that it's not valid in itself. And it is valid in itself, and it should be a discipline in itself, and it's becoming more important. More people are stressing creativity. I don't know if you're aware with Bloom's taxonomy, with the hierarchy of thinking skills. Well, they've just put creativity at the top. And that's what the arts do. And that's arts, capital A arts. That's not just visual arts. And I think that, you know, as corporate America expands, they are all talking about problem solving and creativity. That's the difference between Walmart and Target. You know, there was an article on the internet the other day about what CEOs look for, and they look for that creative person. And so the arts do that. And that's important. There's also a study by a neuroscientist, Eric Jensen, that's really interesting. He wrote a book, The Arts with the Brain in Mind, and he does the neuroscience of the brain, and he describes it as an aggregate, and each person's combination has different strengths. And he says the one thing, you know, you have different connections between this aggregate, and the one discipline that has lasting change in creating new connection are the arts. And he supports the arts in all the schools as an end to itself. He says it teaches delayed gratification. It teaches, you know, lots of different things I can't remember at this point, but, you know, I think it's valid in itself, and important in itself.
Do you think there is a tension, or is there not really a tension between doing it either way?
There has been. Again, it depends on how it's taught. If it's just teaching, art can be taught at a lower end and it can be taught at a higher end. It depends on how much thinking, problem solving. If it's just a technical skill copying, then we're no more than memorizing facts for a history test. So there has to be that development of the thought process behind it to bring it up to the higher level. So yes, arts integrate everything. I mean, arts have been integrated historically, mathematically, you know, they're woven in, art, science. You know, you can prove that all over. It's not an unnatural thing, but it depends on who's teaching it and whether or not they can make the sufficient interconnections at a high enough level. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I know, on the college level, it becomes the conflict. It becomes conflict when you're dealing with finances and budgets and to validate a major. I know that there's some art schools where the fine arts curriculum is having to sort of validate what they do, because students are going more into design classes where there's sort of a definite sort of job when they get out. So parents, especially in these hard economic times, they're going to send their students into this a specific major where they know they're going to have a job when they come out, where when you pursue something like painting or sculpture or some of the fine arts, it's not so definite, and so schools are sort of looking in and saying, why do we offer this? And so their fine art programs are having to justify why they're important. And one of the ways is Sarah was saying, is because of the benefits of the problem-solving aspects of it, the critical thinking, the idea generation. There was also an article in the New York Times about basically what students get from a college education, and is it valid? And they're going through like asking all these colleges what they offer, and they're saying all these things. And at the end, they asked these companies, and the companies basically made a list of, we want problem solvers, we want creative thinkers, and we want people with idea generators, and which is basically everything that the arts offer, fine arts and all the arts kind of offer that. And so there's, I know on the college level, in some instances, there is a tension because of economic significance of
If I might answer your question too, we're also thinking about, Noka, we're thinking about reversing that so that the math and English becomes the tool through which we learn an art. And so working on the curriculum right now, it takes time, but when I first heard of it, I thought that's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that. So it might be happening. We're working on it.
I'm not sure I have anything different to add, but I mean, I would say there definitely is tension, and I think for I've worked in other kind of small nonprofits and larger nonprofit organizations, and we always have to justify the money through, like, so we're talking photographically here. It's like we have to prove to them that they're learning math skills in the darkroom when they do ratios, when they mix chemistry, or they're learning writing skills because we have them write, a piece that goes with a photograph. It can't just be, the experience of taking the picture. And so, I mean, in some ways that's fine, because it's really great to acknowledge that yeah, they learn all these other things too while they're learning an art. But we always do seem to, in my experience, it's like it always has to be justified, and so I think I don't know if that'll ever change, but I mean, I definitely see that as a tension.
The other problem that you always run into is, quite frankly, until you get into college, it's all about the test score. That's how the politicians and the public judge if they're successful or not. And bubbling in the test doesn't always tell everything. And the other thing that Eric Jensen, that book, liked to talk about with the arts, get the hook in the kid to stay in school. And so much of that, you see that. And I think in that in itself, if it accomplishes that and nothing else,